I'm now moving on to question 8 from section 2.4. And before you start the homework questions for problem 8, you should definitely review the homework questions from problem number 7. I do feel like most of the problems from problem number 8, 80% of it's very similar to what you do in question number 7. Now for the problems in question 8, you'll notice that there's a leading coefficient that's not 1. So for this very first example, there's a leading coefficient of 3. And there's also a 15 and a 12. So for a lot of these factoring problems, what you need to do first is you need to factor out the greatest common factor. So usually for these problems, it's the very first number, which is a 3. So you need to factor that out first. So if I pull out the 3, I can write it like that, and then I can set my brackets. And what goes in the brackets? Well, what you do is you divide every single term by your GCF, which is 3. And if you do that, you would get x squared plus 5x plus 4. All right, so that's step number 1. You factor out the GCF, and then to factor this completely, what you need to do is you need to take a look at the trinomial inside the bracket, and you need to factor that basically the same way on how you factored the problems in question number 7. So inside the brackets where I've highlighted the trinomial in yellow, you want to set up some kind of a table where you need two numbers that multiply to 4. So you need your numbers, and then they also need to add up to 5. All right, so this one's not too bad because two numbers that multiply to 4 are 1 and 4, and 1 plus 4 is 5, which adds up to this middle guy. So basically this combination works, so you're using the 1 and the 4. So in order to complete the problem here, what you're doing now is you're writing an x here, an x there, and then plus 1, and then plus 4. And this right here is your final answer. So I would say that for the questions in part 8, you'd have to factor out the GCF first, and then you factor the trinomial is basically the same way like how you did in question number 7. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do all the questions in this section here because I do believe all these questions are good practice. For letter B here, I noticed that I have a leading coefficient of 4. There's a 20 and there's also a 24. So step number 1, I want to factor out this 4. That's the greatest common factor. So if I pull that out, basically I'm dividing every single term by 4. And if I do that, I get y squared plus 5y, and 24 divided by 4 is 6. After that, you want to factor this trinomial right here. What you want to do is you want to set up a little table here. You need two numbers that multiply to 6, and those two numbers need to combine to positive 5. So the numbers I'm thinking are 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. Now if I add these numbers together, I get 7 here and I get 5 there. And you'll notice that this combination works right here because that adds to 5. So the numbers I need are 2 and 3. All right, so to finish off my problem, I write down 4, open up two brackets, and then I use the variable y, and then plus 2, and then y plus 3. And remember, these are the numbers that you got from your table. Okay, that's it for that problem. Let's move on to letter C. All right, so for letter C, I noticed that I have a leading coefficient of 9. There's a 27 and an 18, so there's definitely a common factor. Let's go ahead and pull out the first number, which is the 9. And let's open up a set of brackets here. And if I divide every single term by 9, this is how I can factor out the GCF. This will be z squared plus 3z, and then 18 divided by 9 is going to be 2. After that, you need to factor the trinomial inside there. And I would set up a table on the side here. I need two numbers that multiply to 2, and those two numbers need to add to 3. So those numbers are going to be 1 and 2, right? So 1 times 2 is 2, and 1 plus 2 is going to be 3, right? So the numbers I want to use are 1 and 2. All right, in order to finish this problem off, the 9 stays on the outside, two sets of brackets, and then I would write the variable z, and then plus 1, and then z plus 2. So that right there is my final answer. Okay, so we move on to a letter D here. I'm just going to blow this up here. Okay, letter D. I notice I have a 2, a 4, and a 6. So I'm going to factor out the leading coefficient, which is 2. So if I pull out the 2, let's open up the brackets here. And what you're doing now is you're dividing every single term by 2. So I get u squared minus 2u plus 3. After that, you want to factor the trinomial right there. So I do recommend that you set up a table again. You need two numbers that multiply to 3, and those two numbers need to combine to -2. So the numbers I'm thinking are, well, we got 1 and 3. And after that, yeah, there's nothing else that really works. I mean, there's -1 and -3. And if I look at the sum here, this is 4 and -4. So what that means is I can't factor anymore. So this right here is my final answer. So this whole yellow thing right there, that is my final answer. I cannot factor anymore. All right, let's move on to letter E. There's a -5, a 25, and a -20. Actually, let's just take a look at this -5 here. So this is our very first example where we need to factor out a negative number. So if it's a negative number, let's pull the negative number on the outside. And then let's go ahead and open up our brackets. And now we're dividing every single term here by -5. So you got to be careful here because since you're dividing by a negative number, the signs will change. So for example, this expression right here, -5 divided by -5, so that will give you positive x squared. And then you have a -25 divided by -5, that's going to give you -5x. And finally, at the very end, -20 divided by -5, that's 2 negatives, so that's going to be a positive 4. All right, so that's how you factor out a -5. And then after that, you want to simplify or factor the trinomial inside the brackets. So go ahead and set up another table right here. I need two numbers that multiply to 4, and those two numbers need to combine to -5. So I'm thinking like a combination of 1 and 4. Now 1 plus 4 is going to be 5, and in order to modify that to get -5, just make the first number negative and the second number negative as well, and that will give you the -5. So these are the numbers that you want to use, -1 and -4. All right, so let's put the -5 on the outside, two sets of brackets, and then x minus 1 and x minus 4. Okay, and that's how you can do that particular problem. All right, let's move on to letter F here. So I have a -2 there as my leading coefficient, so let's go ahead and factor out the -2 and open up a set of brackets there, and basically you're dividing every single term by -2. So these numbers are going to be a little bit bigger now. This will be y squared, and positive 58 divided by -2, that's going to be a negative number there because a positive divided by a negative gives you a negative result. And 58 divided by 2 is going to be 29, so 29y. And then finally over here I have -200 divided by -2. That's going to give me a positive 100. Okay, and then after that our goal now is I want to factor this trinomial on the inside there. So let's set up a little t-table here. I need two numbers that multiply to 100, and those two numbers need to combine to -29. Right, so two numbers that multiply to 100, you know, usually students are thinking of like 10 and 10, but if you add those together you get 20, so that doesn't work. Another combination that could work is 4 and 25. 4 times 25 is 100, but if you add those together you would get 29. So I need a -29, so all you really need to do is put a minus sign in front of your numbers, so -24 and -25. If I add those together I get -29. So this combination right here works. So I'm looking at -4 and -5. So -2, two sets of brackets, and then y minus 4 and y minus 25. And that is your final answer for letter F. Okay, let's move on to letter G. Letter G, my leading coefficient here is -3, so let's go ahead and factor out the -3. If I do that, let's open up a bracket here, and we're dividing every single term by -3. And if I do that, I will get z squared minus z, and then minus 6. And just remember there's actually an invisible 1 there, so there's a -1 in the middle term. And what you need to do now is you need to factor the inside expression right here, which I'm highlighting in yellow. I need two numbers that multiply to -6, and those two numbers need to combine to -1. All right, so let's make a little table here. Two numbers that multiply to -6, I'm thinking like 1 and -6, maybe 2 and -3. If I add these together, I get what, -5 there. That doesn't work. 2 minus 3 gives me -1, so that works right there. So 2 and -3 are my numbers. So -3, and then two sets of brackets, and then z plus 2 and z minus 3. And that is my final answer for letter G. All right, for letter H, there's a -4 there, so let me factor out the -4. let's go ahead and divide every single term by -4. And if I do that, I will get a positive u squared, a positive 7u, and 120 divided by -4 is actually -30. All right, so that's step number 1. You want to factor out the greatest common factor. So make sure you know that skill very well by doing some of the homework questions from the earlier sections. And after that, you want to factor this trinomial right here. Let's go ahead and make a t-table. And you need two numbers that multiply to -30, and those two numbers need to add to 7. Okay, so I'm thinking about like a 3 and a 10. So 3 and a 10 gives me 13. Okay, let's try a -3 and a 10. So that would give me so -3 times 10 is -30, and that gives me a positive 7. So I believe that works right there. So the numbers we want to use are -3 and 10. All right, so -4, and then 2 sets of brackets, and then u minus 3 and u plus 10. And that should be it for that particular problem. Okay, I guess we have a few more to go, and then we're done all the problems from section 8. Let me erase that. This is a good problem too because there's a negative sign in front of the x, so there's actually an invisible 1 there. So if I factor out that negative sign, all you're really doing now is you're taking this thing in green and all the signs just flip to the opposite. So what's the opposite of negative? Well, it's positive, so x squared. What's the opposite of negative? It's positive, so 6x. And what's the opposite of positive? It's negative, which is -27. Okay, so maybe I kind of went by that a little bit fast, so let me kind of go back and repeat the steps again. So you notice that there's a negative sign there, so you want to factor that out. Some students, write down like a -1 here if you would like, but when you're factoring out a negative sign, all you're really doing is when you pull that out, basically what's happening is this whole trinomial, all the signs are going to change to its opposite. So right now I have a -x squared. It's negative, so the opposite of negative is positive, so that would be x squared. All right, and then I have a -6x. The opposite of -6x is positive 6x. And if this is a positive 27, the opposite of positive 27 is -27. Okay. Now, if you think about that, if you think about this carefully, you can verify your work by distributing. Negative times x squared is -x squared. Negative times positive 6x is -6x. And this negative sign times -27, a negative times a negative gives you a positive, right? So that's another way where you can verify if you factor out the negative sign correctly. After that, you just need to factor this trinomial here. Let's use a t-table here. I need two numbers that multiply 27 and combine to positive 6. So I'm probably thinking like -3 and 9. -3 plus 9 gives me the positive 6, so that works. So -3 and 9 are my numbers. So the negative sign on the outside, 2 sets of brackets, and then x minus 3 and x plus 9. And that combination should work. Okay, let's move on to letter J. I have a minus sign here, so let's factor out the minus sign. And if I do that, everything, this whole trinomial, all the signs will go to the opposite, I guess. So if I have a -x squared, that becomes positive x squared. If I have a positive 2x, that becomes a -2x. And if I have a positive 44, that becomes -44. All right, so that's how you can factor out the negative sign. And once again, if you actually distribute this negative sign, I can see that I definitely get back to my original question. So that's how you correctly factor out the negative sign. After that, let's go ahead and factor this trinomial here. And to be honest with you, you actually can't factor that. So your final answer is just -x squared minus 2x minus 44. All right, and that's your final answer for letter J. Okay, let's move on to letter K. Now that you have some experience factoring out this negative sign, let's go ahead and do this a little bit faster now. So negative, so x squared minus 7x minus 44. And now I need to factor this inside trinomial here because I need two numbers that multiply to -44 and combine to -7. Set up your t-chart. Two numbers that multiply to 44, I'm thinking like 4 and 11. And if I add those together, I get 15. Okay, so let's make one of the numbers negative. So what about -4 and 11? That's -44, and this gives me positive 7. So in order to fix that, just put the minus sign on the 11, and that would give me -7. This works. So the numbers I have are 4 and -11. So a negative sign, 2 sets of brackets, x plus 4, x minus 11. Great. Let's move on to letter L. I have a minus sign there, so let's go ahead and factor that out. So a negative sign on the outside, then everything becomes the opposite sign, so x squared minus 6x and then plus 9. And after that, you can factor the inside there, t-table. Two numbers that multiply to 9 and combine to negative 6, well, that's going to be negative 3 and negative 3. That gives you negative 6. So two sets of brackets, and my numbers are negative 3 and negative 3. So x minus 3 and x minus 3. So just remember, negative 3 times negative 3 gives you the positive 9, and negative 3 minus 3 gives you negative 6. All right, let's move on to question number 9, and we're just going to do the first 4 questions from question number 9 here. And for question number 9, I'll try to do these questions a little bit faster here. Now we're going to factor out some variables here. So I have a power 3x's there, 2x's there, and 1x there. If I'm factoring out the greatest common factor, which is the lowest power? Is it 3, is it 2, or is it 1? Well, it's just this one guy here, so I can factor out the x. And if I factor out the x, I get x squared plus 8x minus 20. So all we're doing there is we're just dividing every single term by x, and then we lose, every single term will lose an x value. And then from there, you just kind of factor the inside guy, basically same theme. Let's do a t-table here. Two numbers that multiply to negative 20, and those two numbers need to add to 8. So let's think about this one. It's probably going to be a 2 and a 10. So 2 times 10 is 20, so I need a negative 20. So let's go ahead and put the minus sign right there, and that should give me the sum of 8. So yes, negative 2 and 10 work. So this will be x plus 10 and x minus 2. And that's it for number 9. For number 9b, this one here, there's no leading coefficient here, so this one you got to think about this one logically here. Let's go ahead and figure this out. I know that whatever goes here and here has to multiply to x squared, so that's going to be an x and an x. And then I need two numbers that multiply to 36, and those two numbers need to combine to negative 12. So let's go ahead and do a t-chart here. Two numbers that multiply to 36, I'm thinking about 6 and 6, but that gives me a sum of 12. I need a negative 12, so in order to fix that, just put a minus sign in front, and a minus sign in front, and that should give you a negative 12. So these are my numbers, negative 6 and negative 6. So x minus 6 and x minus 6. Now, the last thing that you need to consider here is there's a y squared there, right? So I know that the last two terms, if you multiply that, negative 6 times negative 6, that gives you the positive 36, but you still need the y squared there, so in order to fix that up, just add an extra y and an extra y, and that should do it. Okay, let's move on to letter C. For letter C, one thing I noticed is that every single term has a y, so let's go ahead and factor that out. If I factor that out, I get an x squared minus 11x minus 60. Right, and I know that's going to work because if you just distribute the y on to every single term, you get back to the original problem. So we definitely factored out the greatest common factor correctly. After that, look on the inside, you want to factor that because you need two numbers that multiply to negative 60, and those two numbers need to combine to negative 11. All right, so let's do a chart again. I'm thinking about maybe a 5 and a 6. Actually, no, that's way off. That's how we get to 60 here. I'm thinking about 15 and 4. 15 times 4 gives me 60. And now I need to put a minus sign somewhere here. Let's put the minus sign on the 15, and that should give me negative 11, right? So negative 15 minus 4 is negative 11, and negative 15 times 4 is negative 60. So negative 15 and 4 do work. So this will be y, and then two brackets, and then y minus 15 and y plus 4. Okay, let's move on to letter D. Letter D is probably one of the harder ones because you need to factor out the negative 2. And then also look at the variables. What's the maximum number of variables that you can remove? Well, here's a 4, here's a 3, and here's a 2. So the maximum number of x's that you can remove is actually x squared, the lowest power, right? So what you're factoring out of this one is a negative 2x squared. All right, so that takes a little bit of work to kind of think about the GCF. It's negative 2x squared. And then let's set up the brackets here, and mathematically you're just dividing every single term by negative 2x squared, right? All right, so we do enough of these in the class, so this will be x squared plus 2x, and then minus 15. Okay. After that, you can always, once again, you can always distribute your GCF onto the inside, and if I do that, I definitely get back to this original question, so I definitely know that I factored this correctly. All right, and now we've got to just factor the trinomial on the inside. Let's do a t-table here because I need two numbers that multiply to negative 15 and combine to positive 2. So I'm thinking about like 5 and 3, and I need to throw a minus sign somewhere in there, probably on the negative 3, right? And that would give me a sum of 2. So 5 and negative 3 are my numbers. So negative 2x squared, and then I need two sets of brackets, and then x plus 5 and x minus 3. And that's how you factor the problems on question number 9. Okay, in order to kind of finish up this homework video guide, let me go and do some of the questions in number 11 here. We'll just do the first 4, factor completely. So I would say that most of these questions, the themes are the same. You just have to find the GCF right from the get-go. So for question 11a, every single term has a 2a plus 5. That's a common factor, so that means you can pull that out. So 2a plus 5. If I pull that out, you'll notice that we have leftovers, right? And what is left over? Well, there's a y squared, there's a 9 and a y, and there's a negative 10 and a negative 10. Okay, so let's think about this logically here. We have a y squared there, so that remains. And then I have a 9 and a y, so I'll leave that as plus 9y. And at the very end here, I have a negative 10, right? So negative 10. And I'll put the bracket like that. Okay. All right, good. And then after that, we just need to factor this trinomial here, which I'm highlighting in yellow. And we've done several of these throughout this homework video. Set up a chart here. We need two numbers that multiply to negative 10, and we need two numbers that, and those numbers need to combine to 9. So I'm thinking about 10 and minus 1. That will give me a sum of 9, right? So 10 and minus 1. So 10 and minus 1. So in order to do this, I have a 2a plus 5, and then two brackets here, and then a y plus 10, and a y minus 1. And that's how you factor question 11a. Okay, let's move on to letter B here. You'll notice that every single term has an a plus b, so that's a common factor, so let's pull that out. And then ask yourself what is left over. Well, there's an x cubed there. There's a negative 6x squared. There's also a plus 8x. Okay. Now the problem is we can continue factoring the inside here because every single term has an x, right? So believe it or not, ask yourself which is the lowest power of x. Is it 3, 2, or a 1? Well, it's the 1, so you can pull out an extra x here. If I do that, I get x squared minus 6x plus 8. All right, so we've got to do greatest common factoring twice in this problem. I'm going to erase this here so I have a little bit of space. And what you're going to do now is you're going to factor this trinomial here because this is one of the classic trinomials where you need two numbers that multiply to 8, and those two numbers need to combine to negative 6. So using my t-chart here, two numbers that multiply to 8, I'm thinking about 4 and 2. All right, so since I need this gives me a combination of 6 there, right? 4 plus 2 is 6. So in order to fix that, I need to put negative signs in both numbers, and the negative 4 and 2 work, right? So negative 4 times negative 2 is positive 8, and negative 4 minus 2 is negative 6. All right, let's go ahead and finish this problem off. So a plus b, and then this x here, usually you can put that in the front. And then I need two sets of brackets here. And using a darker marker here, this is going to be x minus 4 and x minus 2. So that right there is my final answer after simplifying and factoring as much as possible. Okay, let's move on to letter C here. For letter C, this one should be a bit easier, I hope. There's a 2a plus b, 2a plus b, and a 2a plus b. So let's pull that out. 2a plus b, and what's left over, there's an x squared, so x squared, and then there's a negative 12x, so minus 12x. So I'm talking about, let me use a different marker here. I was talking about that negative 12 and that x, that gives you the negative 12x, and then plus, and then there's a 27 here, so plus 27. Okay, and then after that, you need to factor this trinomial here in blue. So we need two numbers that multiply to 27, and those two numbers need to combine to negative 12. So the two numbers that multiply 27, it's probably 9 and 3, and in order to make this combine to negative 12 is just put minus signs in the middle, right? So your final answer is 2a plus b, two sets of brackets, and then x minus 9 and x minus 3. Okay. All right, let's move on to letter D. This is the last one that I'll do for this homework video guide. So there's a 3a minus b, 3a minus b, and a 3a minus b. So let's pull that out as 3a minus b. And then I have a y squared there. Okay, so the y squared remains. And then you'll notice that there's a negative 13y. So that negative 13y stays. And then I have a plus 40. So that's going to be plus 40. All right, and then from here on, you need to factor the trinomial, which is this part right here. So two sets of brackets again, a y and a y. We need two numbers that multiply to 40, and those two numbers need to combine to negative 13. So I'm thinking probably like 8 and 5. 8 times 5 is 40, but to get to negative 13, you need to make both numbers negative. So y minus 8 and y minus 5. All right, so that concludes this homework video guide.